Right, hello there and welcome to our channel. Today I'm going to be speaking about Anglo-Saxon lifestyle. Before that, please remember to click in the corner there so that notification, so that we can let you know of things coming, and you can get comments and things like that. Please send us your comments, it's always useful. Anyway, as you know, I am Egil Thorsan. I am a warrior, I am a trader, runecaster, storyteller and a bit of a history geek. So what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about Anglo-Saxon lifestyle. What I'm going to do is to split it into three camps. The slave or lower orders, the sort of middling ranks and the lords. So let's start with a poor old slave. How did you get to be a slave? Well, one way is you're born into it, your parents are slaves and you're born into slavery, that's one way. Secondly, you could be captured in battle. The life of a slave depended vastly on who you were sold to and what tasks you were doing. You got slaves who taught people to read and write, people who may be captured in raids. These people could read and write and would give your children an education. Others would help out. Maybe you're a shoemaker and business is good and you have a slave. They live in with you, they're almost a family member, but they just don't have the rights that you did. So you could be ending up as a field hand, which means long hard hours, and let's face it, you're not going to live very long. So, or you could end up mining ore, things like that. Very strenuous jobs. So we move on to the Midland Person. These are people who are free, they have their farm and they work for their lord, and also they are working for the church. The church would take 1/10 of all their earnings and there was no getting out of it, that's what you had to do. So you'd work for your lord for about 8 hours, then your spare time you would work on your land for the lord, and you know, it's a hard work. Maybe you make a profit, and which means you could buy a slave to help you out. You see where I'm coming from on that. But for instance, life is a lot harder. I mean, you look at Bragi and myself, we'd be considered quite chunky people in those days. Obesity was something that was very, very, very rare because people were hungry all the time. Even middling ranks and kings would probably end up wishing they had more food. However, the average farmer would be concerned with his crops and his family. He would raise his children, and the women would be doing household chores, which would include not only grinding grains for bread, they would be looking after children, teaching them how to be adults, and looking after their husbands. So all in all, it's a pretty hard life. So we come to the lords. The lord, again, it's not easy because he's managing several farms, he's taxing them and having to get the taxes in. Maybe his food situation won't be so pressing as anyone else's, but he's then got to look out for rival lords trying to steal his land and cattle and, yeah, slaves even. So he's got to be having armed men about him. Now, armed men are all well and good when they're on your side, but if the neighbouring lord ends up paying them a bit more, you're dead. And you know, you're a long time dead, let's put it that way. So there's that aspect of it. There would be feasts. You get seasonal feasts like Yuletide, Easter and things like that, but you would also have diplomatic feast. So imagine I'm a lord in Derby, Bragg has come to sort out a deal, he's in Nottinghamshire say, so we cement the deal by having a feast, and depending on how well I feed him and how well things go, depends upon whether he's going to agree to the agreement or keep to it. So it's, people think, you know, these lords would just sit back and do nothing. Well, no, it's far more stressful, because not only are you running these farms and yes, you're getting wealthy, there's always somebody willing to take it off you, and you don't necessarily know who your enemy is. You know, bodyguards, things like that, they only do it because you're paying them. And this is one thing about wealth throughout the Dark Ages. If you had money, you shed it around, you gave gifts. You hear in the Sagas, or ring givers, things like that. If you didn't, and they knew you'd got money, they would desert you because they think you're mean, and chances are you'd end up dead and they'd take all your wealth anyway. Also, as a middling class, you would be part of the feud. The feud is, it's a bit like the TA really, in that you had to serve a certain amount of time, and King Alfred, being clever, he had one half doing it for so many months. Then when the harvest was due, they were released in to gather the harvest. The other half of your army was on guard that way. So you got the best of both worlds. And don't think you're gonna, the average person's gonna go in with lots of weapons. You may have an axe, you may have a wound knife, which is pretty formidable until you meet somebody in full mail with a sword, a spear and everything else. So to recap, we divide the Saxon life into three classes: the lower peasant class, the farmer, freeman and the lord. And we know, I think we could sum it up in one sentence really: life was very hard. And you know, it bears thinking about. I mean, also, as I say, not only do you have all of this, you would have to be careful when you went to the woods, because the wildlife there, you got wolves, wild boars, wild cats, and even a deer can gore you. I mean, we think of deer as these passive things. You corner one and see how far you get. But anyway, that's a thumbnail sketch of Saxon life. I'm sure in later videos we'll cover it in greater detail. But until then, when we meet again, have fun. Bye now.